So once again, good morning to everyone. Good morning to our three panelists who have joined us, and to all the guests who are still coming into the guest room. This morning we are dealing with a topic which is self-evidently important, and we've entitled it The Importance of Fathers. When I say these things, I feel it's like I say, self-evident and hardly needs to be said, but fathers play a critical role in our society, and unfortunately, all too often fathers fail to play the critical role that they should be playing in our society. When we're talking about fathers, we're not only talking about biological fathers, but as the invitation says, the social fathers, the people who provide care and emotional support, the father figures in the life of children who, for one reason or another, may not have access to their own biological father. We have three speakers, as you can see, joining us to discuss this issue. I'm going to read out bios of all three of them so that you have a vague idea of who they all are and what they all do. These bios are fairly lengthy, so bear with me. Our first speaker will be Jaco van Schalkwyk. In 2013, Jaco founded the Character Company, which is an NPO with a mission to change South Africa's culture of gender-based violence, corruption, and abuse. Founding the company has been a deeply personal journey for Jaco, who grew up without a positive male role model himself. It has helped me more and more to understand the challenges of growing up with an absent father, he says. Through its mentorship program for young boys aged 5 to 10, the Character Company runs weekly activities for small groups, weekend activities for all groups and families, and camps throughout the year. The organization also offers support structures for single mothers and advocates for better treatment of women and children. All the mentors are guided by other mentors in the organization, and all teach and share the same value system based on respect, honesty, self-discipline, courage, and kindness. The second speaker will be Brendan Aloys. Brendan's a social service professional from Cape Town who's worked in the men's sector at Hearts of Men, Amakaya, and the Mankind Project on various interventions and programs targeting men and boys to help heal them from their own pain and wounding through deeply personal transformative experiences in rites of passage programs and safe spaces, and is currently the graduate field worker at the Chrysalis Academy, which I'm sure many of us know as a youth leadership and development organization, empowering young people to take responsibility for their personal growth. Brendan has a diploma in child and youth care, auxiliary social work, and community development. And he says he's keen to engage with men and boys unpacking the notions of masculinity with a focus on their own identity, direction, purpose, and mission, and their way of being in the world. And then our third speaker will be Kevin Rutter, who is the founder of Fathers in Africa, a non-partisan, non-profit organization established in 2006. Fathers in Africa believes that fatherlessness is the most significant family and social problem facing South Africa, and it champions an organization to address this problem. The lack of responsible fathering and male mentorship has contributed significantly to the socialization of young men into a toxic masculinity, manifesting with high rates of rape, gender-based violence, violence against children, teenage pregnancy, substance abuse, and other crime. I think we can tell just from the subject matter of those bios what a deep-seated issue this is in our society, and it's extremely encouraging to know that there are organizations like the three represented here this morning that are dealing with it. I'm sure we're going to be given some really useful and inspiring insights into how we address this issue. Before I hand over to the first speaker, just a couple of points of what do we call it? Housekeeping. The one is that in the chat box, you will find the usual feedback form which we'd ask you to fill in towards the end of the session. Give us your take on what you've heard, your comments, and most importantly, your suggestions for other issues to be covered in future events like this. Those of you who are new to us, and I see many familiar names, but others that are not so familiar, if you'd like to join our mailing list to receive invitations to future events and also copies of the briefing papers and other publications that we put out, please do just enter your mailing list into the chat box or communicate with us via our website or via our own email address, info@cplo.org.za. I should have said at the beginning, and I apologize that I didn't, that I'm Mike Pothier. I'm the program manager of the Catholic Parliamentary Liaison Office. I do this so often that I sometimes forget that we always have a new audience. So Catholic Parliamentary Liaison Office is an office of the Southern African Catholic Bishops' Conference. We are based in Cape Town. Our main task is to, as the name suggests, liaise with Parliament on legislation and policy issues. We spend a lot of time making submissions to parliamentary committees. We publish briefing papers and other short documents trying to analyze and understand what's happening in our country from legislative policy and small p political developments. And we hold events like this, around about 20 of them every year, where we try to bring people together from a range of particularly civil society and faith-based organizations with expert input to discuss the issues of the day. The last thing before we start is that as a faith-based organization, we always just take a few seconds at the beginning to center ourselves, to invoke the Holy Spirit on what we are doing, and just to remind ourselves why we have taken the trouble to be here together this morning. So if you'll just join me for a few seconds. Thank you. So I think that's all the announcements over with. I'm going to hand over now to Jaco van Skalkwyk. Jaco, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. And let me just start by saying thank you for the opportunity to just share out of my own life and experiences on something that I'm deeply passionate about. I have, my heart burns for the restoration of godly masculinity in our society, in our country, at the core of everything that we're dealing with. That is the solution. Yeah, so this is a wonderful platform. It's a topic that we talk about somewhere. It's almost like in the hallways there's some whispering about it, but sadly it's not something that we are very intentional about to actively starting to do and to change our environments. And so whenever there's opportunities like this, I'm always very, very grateful for that. So thank you, and looking forward to continuous engagement on this. I honestly believe that at the core of all the challenges we're facing in society, in our communities, is the issue of fatherlessness. The statistics around this is horrendous. And unfortunately, there's such an enormous promotion of the bad things around us that we don't celebrate the good attempts of this. Now, so and unfortunately, we have to. We can't talk about the role of fathers if we don't also understand where, as fathers, we are lacking in that space. And so for us, even in the work that we do at the Character Company, that process starts very intentional at a very early age. So we start taking boys into our program between the ages of 5 and 10. And then it's a long-term journey. We actively engage throughout the teenage years and then into adulthood, because we understand that this is an ongoing journey. There is simply not a 6-month course that you can do on the impact of an absent father, and then you're okay with that. And my own life speaks of those challenges. And so I think it's very important for us to understand the massive role that we have as fathers. We are responsible to instill a certain amount of things into the lives of our children. And we talk about boys and girls here. Typically for a boy, there's a question around the age of 5 to 10, and that is, am I good enough? Am I strong enough? Can I do this? It's like when you spend time in that age group, you understand that that those are adventurers and explorers, and they just want to know if they can do all of this stuff. For a girl, the question is like, am I pretty enough? Am I worth someone pursuing my heart in this, for what it stands for? And so if we understand the role that we have as fathers, then we understand how we play into those spaces. And I think it's very important here also to understand that we say, when we talk about being an intentional father, often when I talk to men about this, there's an immediate reaction about the fact that, what I'm hearing is that I'm not doing good enough in this space. And I think that often shuts down the conversation, or we feel that we just can't do something further, or we can't have the conversation. And so I think, one of the things that you have to understand, for those of you, the parents here, you would appreciate this. I've come to realize that being a parent is to see how little damage you can cause in the life of your child. Because that's essentially what it's going to be about. When you grow up with an absent father, you understand the huge implications of not having any positive influence in your life. But as a parent, you constantly understand that, like, as you're living and trying to figure out life, you are stepping on toes all the time, and your children are going to be involved in that process. And that's why it's so important to build these key relationships on a strong foundation from a young age. I'm a single dad which is now a young woman. My daughter turns 20 in 2 weeks. And if I look back at my journey, it is a phenomenal experience of growth for myself. It's all these milestones of seeing stuff happen as a dad, but there's often times where I reflect and I'm thinking, I could have done better there, or I could have done better there. And it's only through a very strong relationship that we have that we can constantly have these conversations where I understand that that's not what made me. That's not the identity of my parenting. The identity of being a dad, which is the title I enjoy most out of everything, is the fact that I have a relationship that continuously grows and we can talk about these things. So for us as fathers, that's very, very important. And if we understand that, then we understand that being an intentional father doesn't mean, and it's never meant that I'm going to spend more time with my child than I've spent with anyone else in that day. So if I look at my day and I want to break up my day, it means that, that I can't go to work and I can't build other relationships because I must be a better dad in this. And I think that's where we get stuck, because intentional fathering means that you understand that there is no way that you are going to spend more time with your child today than the world, the school, your child's friends, all of those other things. And so if we understand that, then it's not a question of like, I have to put in more time. I just have to be more intentional in that. And if I can be more intentional, it means that when I'm in the space of my children, I can live in their worlds. I don't expect them constantly to live in my world. And a very practical thing about that for dads is when you sit and watch a game of, we were talking about cricket earlier. So if you sit and watch a game of cricket and your child, your son or your daughter is playing on the carpet in front of you, please understand that you're not spending time with your child. Your child is around, but you're not being an intentional father. And again, what I'm not saying there is that you cannot do those things. I'm just saying don't confuse those things for being a dad. Please don't use the terms I'm babysitting because my wife's at the shops, because you're not babysitting, you're parenting. And so we have to be very, very intentional about the words we use and the way we spend time. As a father, I believe that being intentional in that space means that I'm going to walk into the life of my child, into his or her world, and I'm going to spend some time there. And that means that you are going to have a tea party with your daughter and drink water out of a little teacup, which you are not sure where it comes from. And you are going to have your hair in ponytails, and you're going to get makeup on your nails, or paint on your nails or makeup on your face. And you're going to have, you are going to play pretend, and that's going to be great. And you're going to sit on the carpet and play cards with your son, and you're going to do all of these amazing things because that is the world that they're in, and that's the world that you get to lead them in. Because the moment that you spend time there, that father heart that you have, that God has instilled in us, is something that brings out something in our children that where they really want to make us proud, that they really want to do something. And so they involve that time, it promotes some inner growth and strength for them. So it means that they're in a space where they go like, man, I really want to do this. And so how do I do this? And I think that's a big role for fathers, is to pull out not the experiences, but to pull out the abilities of our children, the stuff that they dream about, to help them to understand what can they become, and what do they dream about, and how do they build those worlds, because they know that they've got the support from you. if we can understand that, it leads us into the next spaces to understand that this is not a journey I can do on my own. You know, we often talk about it takes a village to raise a child. And I often talk to men and to women or to audiences about that. And I'm saying, that's great, and it does. But what does your village look like right now? If we say it takes a village to raise a child, is your village flush, and is it doing well? Is there people involved in this, or is your village a desolated space that is, you know, neglected buildings and broken down water tanks? And, you know, what does that picture look like? Because if we understand the challenge of masculinity, and this has to be a role, or has to play a role in our thinking here, if we understand the role of masculinity, and we understand how completely confused we are in that space, we understand that our pride and our ego often stands in the way of being better fathers, because we do not want to necessarily admit that we don't know how to operate in this space. And if we consider the statistics around absent fathers, and if we consider in my own life that I haven't had those examples growing up, then how do I realistically think that I'm going to be a better father if I don't involve other men into this conversation? And I'm not talking about men that I perceive to be perfect fathers, because a perfect father is just a father that can make mistakes and own those mistakes and have conversations around that and apologize and draw his children into those conversations and into his life and the reality of things. If I don't understand that I need other men in my life as a father that can help and mold and shape me in those spaces, men that I can talk to and I can have conversations with, then I'm in danger of allowing my ego and my pride to stand in the way of being a better father. Because out of the experiences that I share and the questions I ask, I can be teachable. And teachability is such an important aspect for us as men and therefore fathers. So then we have to take a step back and we have to ask about what does masculinity look like for us? Because masculinity is what I'm going to model to my children. I have to show my son the kind of man that he can become. I have to show my daughter the kind of man that she would want to have in her life. And that becomes also very simple and practical things. When I go out with my daughter, I open the car door for her. I will carry bags if we're in the shop. If we sit down at a restaurant, I'll open a drink for her and pour it for her. Those are very small little things that just, not because I think she cannot do it. And you have to understand that you are going to raise your boy to be a real gentleman and be real kind based on a value system, because that's your role in a world that is not good to kind. It is very, very difficult these days to be a great gentleman because there are not very many opportunities and they are not well received often. But one of the things in that space which we get to create, and it was one of the greatest compliments of my life, is when my daughter said to me, when you do those things, it shows me that I'm loved and I'm appreciated. And it sets a standard so that when someone wants to come into my life, I know that nothing below that is actually, or even at that level, is going to be acceptable. I would want someone that's going to try and lift that bar. And so when we think about what we do in that space as a father, that's part of our role. It comes back to that value system, which is again something that I really believe a dad's responsibility is. And even right now, if you're a father, or if you're not a father yet, you listen to this, you are responsible to set the value system for your family. You know, right now, your family might just be yourself. And it's important that right now you go through that exercise for yourself to set this, to cement a set of values for yourself, so that as you start engaging in relationships and as you start building a family, that those are the things that is the foundation, because our value system is the roadmap to the things that we need. And so if we can understand that, we understand the importance of what we need to do as fathers. If we are intentional about this, it means that we can create spaces where our children grow up seeing different examples. One of the conversations I had recently at one of our camps, with one of the men, we run a program called Men Around the Fire, and we engage in conversations with men around masculinity and bringing people into spaces of being vulnerable. And one of the things that I was very aware of, because we had some of our older boys sitting into the conversations, was this guy was saying, you know, he came to this camp and he thought, like, you know, he's going to have to really, really work so hard. You know, these kids are going to be broken. And he arrives here, and these kids are so well sorted out and they're well rounded, and they, you know, all the stuff that he thought was going to have to happen is already here. And I said to him, you know, the amazing thing about this is that you have to understand that the boys that are here are light years ahead of the men that are here, because these boys have had intentional mentorship in their lives. And so one of the things that they do, and this is where fathers play such an important role. And when I talk about fathers here, obviously the first prize would be for fathers to be the fathers that are at home. But the statistics tells us that 70% of our kids are growing up in single parent homes. And out of our experience, as many as 4 out of 5 boys do not have an intentional positive male role model in his life. And so we do talk about social fathers, and that's probably a more important thing, a title in our society right now because of the statistics of absent fathers. But I said to you, because these boys have had intentional social fathers in their life, they have not just heard about values and heard about vulnerability and heard about accountability and how that leads to commitment, but they've actually seen it in practice. And when you talk about stuff and you learn about things and you model it, your children see that happen and they see that play out and they see the benefits of it and they follow that. And so we have to understand that our children will follow the examples we set them. And so if we look at our country and the way that people behave, we have to understand that we have neglected to step into the role of fathers and social fathers because our young people are behaving in the way they've become the examples that we've set. And we can't be upset about that. We have to be upset to ourselves. We have to be angry at ourselves for that because that's the examples we set. And so there are so many opportunities for us to look at environments right now that is negative and that is broken to see how we can fix it. And it is only through the intentional walking into those spaces that we get to fix that. And that's why fatherhood is so important. So it has to come back to understanding the state of masculinity right now, understanding how to fix that. Because once I fix that, I can then intentionally starting to model that. Because I can't model that just from book knowledge. So I can go and read up right now. I mean, all the stuff we talk about essentially when it comes to the statistics of positive fathers and how they change that. We can read that. And then I can go and stand in front of a bunch of kids and I can tell them all these things. So I can stand in front of a bunch of dads and I can tell them, if you do this and do this, then it will change. But that comes out of an academic space. It's like we only create policy, but we don't see change. Only when I understand this from my own experiences, only when I live into this space, do I get to bring about the change. And so we have to understand that because that's the way that change works. Change comes from the inside. Once I've changed the heart, then I can add a value system because the ground is fertile. I can't do it the other way because then it just doesn't last. And we know that in every aspect of our lives. And so fatherhood comes with that. It comes with an intentional understanding of where I am in this space right now for myself. What is it that I need to do to better myself and how am I going to do that? What is the stuff I'm going to engage in? What are the conversations I'm going to involve myself in? Who are the men that I'm going to surround myself? That small group of 4 men that sits at my table that I can have deep conversations with, intentional conversations with, where I can say, this is what I'm struggling with. And I can say that because I know that you've got my heart and you've got my back. And I know that you are understanding that this is a difficult space because you are either a father already or you are experiencing some of the same challenges. And so when we understand that, we get to work in that. And so the process of this then means that I can then be intentional and I can actually have some great examples. And it doesn't take rocket science to figure this out. And so for dads out there or social fathers, the great experience the great experience for us or the opportunity we have is that we have created a program where a lot of these things are in place. And so the social fathers that we call mentors that walk into the space have got a platform, they've got stuff to talk about, they understand the engagement and we learn all the time. And that's the important part here. And I always say that, we are going to be better at mentorship tomorrow because we are mentoring today and we're learning from those lessons. And so I have to understand that as a man, I have to understand the space of masculinity. I have to understand who I surround myself with. I have to understand what I need to, what am I reading today? What does my child see me reading today that is building into me being a better father? What am I watching today with my children that is showing him that I want to be a better father? If you are watching a movie with your children, at some point you have to tell your child that he must close his eyes because there's a scene on the TV that even you blushing about. Like, these are very, very simple things, and when we have conversations around that, then we get to understand it better. So I often say to fathers, like, today, when you are, and this is very practical. So it's Friday morning, by 6 o'clock tonight, a lot of men, a lot of fathers, a lot of husbands are still at work, and often they're still at work because they are trying to chase validation in what they do. We have had enough conversations with men to understand that. We understand how important those things are. We understand if we don't talk about the fact that if we like if we can't admit that sometimes often we just don't know what's going on. We are desperately holding on for our survival, which is why the suicide statistics in our country under men is so devastatingly high. Tonight, men are going to be at work in dangerous spaces with secretaries because they don't want to be home, because they don't know how to be fathers and how to be husbands. And that breaks down the basic fiber, because we are not in spaces where we're intentional about this. And so tonight, work is not going to go away, and work will not stop by Monday. Take some time, leave an hour earlier, stop at the shop, get some boerewors, get firelighters and some fire. Go home and tell your son, listen, I am going to invite you, and let's build a fire together. I don't care if you have to Google it. Figure out how to do this with your son, and put something on the fire and spoil your family with something where you're intentional about this. Figure out ways how you can do this where you are not feeling like you're staring at a mountain in front of you that is so big that you cannot get over it. And that is why you need men in your life. That is why you need to have these conversations, because together we can figure those things out. I mean, there's so many things to talk about this. I think just wrapping this up, I want to really encourage men in this space. If you are a father or a social father, there is nowhere does it come to a place where it's too late. They say, when is the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. The second best time? Today. You can fix this. I've seen that. I've seen how the relationship between me and my father was restored a couple of months back, and I see how that has changed because of the teachability and the growth in this space. You can do this, but you need to understand the space you find yourself in. You need to understand that you cannot do this alone. You need to be teachable in this space and be guided by other men that are walking the same journey as you. And you have to build those relationships. But you cannot ignore it, because if you ignore it, it means that you're missing out on one of the greatest experiences, and that is being a father. And you're missing out on the greatest teaching moments for yourself and the way that you are growing in this space when you get to be free. There's nothing like walking around with ponytails in your hair and pink nails as a father. And so, that is a great opportunity when you get that, and your daughter can walk with you and she's all proud of that. And so I want to encourage you with that. And I really want to say, just take a moment and think on how you can be intentional about this. You cannot spend more time than anything else in your child's life. But if you do not, as a parting thought, think about this. You've got this piece of land that you've plowed. Weeds grow without you making any effort. And if you are not in that field on a regular basis and tending to it and watering it, weeds will overtake this. And so look at this fertile field that you've got, and you've planted something there as a parent. If you don't spend time there, you are going to lose the battle here very, very quickly. And the longer you neglect the time, the harder it becomes. Because children grow in that space, and they are influenced in that space. The 17-year-old that is involved in a gang rape or a school stabbing, 12 years ago was a 5-year-old that we neglected. And so that's the role that we get to play. So thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about this. There is nothing more important than being a father. There's nothing more immediate that we need than this. And if we look at the stats around the stuff that we're dealing with, gender-based violence, corruption, suicide, substance abuse, those are things we get to fix if we're being intentional as fathers.
Thank you very much, Jacob. Thank you indeed. Intentionality is obviously the key word that we take away from your presentation. Also, the importance of working with, of being open to working with and learning from other fathers. Just before I hand over to Brendan, please feel free to enter any comments or questions that you may have into the Q&A box. That's the best way for our guests to communicate with the panelists. We obviously can't have all 49 people on the panel speaking. So at any stage, you're welcome to enter those into the Q&A, and they will be dealt with either by the panelists as they speak, or when we open it up for discussion after the 3 presentations. So Brendan, over to you.
Good morning, Mike, and thank you. Good morning to the other panelists, and thank you, Mike, for the opportunity to engage around the important issues of fathers and fatherlessness. Before I want to go into the discussion, I just want to read a quote by Steve Biddulph. Steve Biddulph is an Australian writer, and he talks about manhood And there's one chapter in his book, Manhood, that speaks to fixing it with your father. And he says in his book, your father is your emotional line of contact to your masculinity. You have to work towards a clear and resolved relationship between yourself and him. You cannot get on with your life successfully until you have understood him, forgiven him, and come in some way to respect him. You may do this in conversation with him if he's still alive, or in your mind if he's dead. Unless you do this work, his corpse will trip you over every time you move. So in South Africa, we the latest research, Stats South Africa and Songa Gender Justice will tell you that over 60% of children grow up without a father in South Africa. And in South Africa, we have to take, there are some barriers to fatherhood in this country. We have to look at the historical barriers, where we come from as a country, um, that has um, took fathers away from the family. The migrant system, where fathers went from the villages to to go and work in the mines. Also, we know the brutal apartheid system in this country um, has also taken fathers away from their families for many decades because they were involved in exile and in the country, in prison or elsewhere, struggling for the liberation of this country. Also, there's the issue of poverty, unemployment. Those are the historical and structural issues that that impact on fatherhood in South Africa, and those are the barriers to fatherhood in this country. Um, and I think from my side, I am 39 years old. I have never met my father, so I also grew up without a father for almost 4 decades. Um, and we have this thing that we call, we talk about father hunger. Father hunger speaks to a deep desire of children to have a connection and a bond with their father. And if you've never seen your father, if you've never had a father, um, it's very difficult to in your development as a child, going particularly as a young man, going through childhood and then through adolescence. Adolescence is a very difficult stage, and that's why a lot of young men on the Cape Flats and on in Cape Town and in communities, I call them low income communities, and communities where people are really struggling in terms of poverty, unemployment, and also the issues of crime and violence. Um, there's this. Oprah says, "If you know better, you do better," and a lot of men and young men in our communities, they are broken, they are wounded because they've never had a father figure. They've never received a love and the care of the father. I was very fortunate in the sense that in the early 2000s, I joined a program called Hearts of Men, where we were exposed to positive male role models in our community. And then what happened was, so we were enrolled in the program. The name of so it was Hearts of Men, and it was the slogan was men guiding boys to be men. So I was then part of the program, and what happened was, it was a 9-month program for young men that we went through, very intensive program. And we went to the mountains, and we went through a process of a rites of passage and an initiation, crossing the threshold from boyhood into manhood. And we, during the camp, you we kind of unpacked some of the issues of to help young men that have never been fathered, young men who struggle with issues of father hunger, identity, um, issues of to find a space, a safe space in the mountains where they could heal from their pain and from the issues that they are struggling with because they grew up without a father. One of the things that that is very profound to do work with men and boys and rites of passage work, particularly in nature, because we use nature as a healing therapist to facilitate the process of healing internally. So nature as a healing therapist, for men and boys, and even for young women. Um, so the work that we've done at Hearts of Men is really about helping men to to go through a process of healing, but also to discover themselves, who they are, and then their purpose in life. So, and then when a man discovers his identity, who he is as a man, his masculinity, but also his purpose, then it gives him a mission in life. So a lot of the men that went through that program then started to become positive male role models in our community. And for me, some of those men became a social father to me. So they've provided a deep care, nurturing, mentoring, support, coaching of what it is to be a man, positive male masculinity, um, issues of like Yaku says, values, respect. I know a man that has mentored me for many years, is Nick Fine, and he said to me once, he said to a group of us, he talked about the value of respect, and to respect people despite of who they are, where they come from, even if they are homeless. You need to show respect and dignity to every single human being. um, so respect is not about how other people are treating you. Respect is really about valuing people, and treating them with dignity despite of who they are and where they come from. Yeah. So also, we at the academy, Chrysalis Academy, we work with both men and with boys, both with young men and with young women. We've had in the month of June, early the first or the second week of June, we had a recruitment, and a young woman from Atlantis, um, uh, in Cape Town, was sitting in front of me, and I was interviewing her, and I was she is a beautiful young woman, and she's doing so much under very, very difficult circumstances. So we had a dialogue, and I asked her about her father, and immediately I noticed just tears rolling down her face, and she said, "Listen, sir, my father uh, had made a decision not to be part of my life. This young woman matriculated. She's such a responsible young woman. The way that she's carrying herself. She's actually a role model. Um, During the week at school, she's volunteering at the aftercare, reading for other uh, um, for other school young learners. But she said, "Sir, you know, my father, the choices that he made not to be part of my life is hurting me so much, and it causes so much scars in my life, to the point where I don't want to talk about that." So even for young women, so we see it in the work that we do at the academy, um, that young women and young men, they growing up without a father, and the devastating impact and consequences they have it has on their lives. Um, with the work that we also do is we provide the positive male role models, and father figures and social father figures to those young people, then to mentor them, to guide them, to inspire them, to also challenge them, uh, to pursue their goals and their dreams, also to challenge them to wherever they need to change their behavior and adjust behavior where they make negative consequences, to step up so that they can make the right choices for themselves. Um, One of the other things that I am a father to two boys, Caleb and Paul. So Caleb is 16 years old. He's the eldest. Paul is 13 years old. And I have never had a father, but I have had men that I look up to, that I admire, men that I trust, men that I am accountable to, men that hold me accountable for how I show up in the world and how I live my life. So today I am fathering two boys, and I am spending a lot of time with them, um, making sure that I teach them the values and the morals, and the values and the morals instilled in them so that they can know how to respect women, how to treat other people with respect and dignity, how uh, to to have compassion. One of the things that Steve Biddulph also talks about is that there are three enemies of men. One is emotional timidity, the ability or the inability of men to talk about their emotions and their feelings. And in our culture, in South Africa, and in some cultures, some African cultures, young men are not encouraged to talk about their emotions and their feelings. And that's why I've had a interesting discussion with a young man that is currently on course with us. And he said to me, "Sir, we don't talk as African men. We don't express our emotions, our feelings. We don't talk about, even when we go through bereavement and grief, we don't talk about our emotions. We suppress it, we shut down, and then part of what we do is we do indulge in alcohol and other substances to deal with the pain. Um, and it's true for many men. We have a culture of men not opening up, men not sharing, men not talking about their own pain, about their own feelings, to find healing, restoration, so that they can journey and also live life with a purpose. Um, Steve Biddulph says this. He says, your place of wounding is also your place of genius. So the areas in your life where you have been wounded, particularly the fatherhood, if you address it, if you deal with it and you heal, you become powerful in that area of your life, you will be a light to others. Um, yeah, I think that's one of the things. So what we cultivate in the work that we do with men and with boys in circles, we encourage and we create brave spaces, safe spaces for men to talk about their emotions and their feelings and their pain in a non-judgmental way, where they can receive the support and compassion from other men, and to heal, so that they can live life in mission, with a mission to change the world, with a mission to love their family, with a mission to be a positive male role model in society, with a mission to treat women with respect and dignity and with kindness, and to communicate. Um, One of the other things is, and that's why the statistics around suicide is so high in our country. Loneliness. One of the biggest enemies of men is also loneliness, and men suffer in silence. Um, and part of the work that we do with men and with boys is also, when I was working at a child protection agency, when a boy have committed suicide, all the boys that commit suicide, my manager would normally ask me to conduct the dead reviews, to write a report about what happened and why the boy committed suicide. And that's why part of, we also do what we call Head, Heart, and Soul Weekends, which is a rites of passage program for young men. And we work in communities on the Cape Flats. And a lot of the time, young people, particularly young boys, they struggle with bullying. They don't feel good bullying. Um, they struggle with mental health issues like depression, anxiety, and suicide, and self harm, and they don't have a opportunity or a safe space for them to talk about those mental health challenges. Um, and so, through the work that we do, we provide that opportunity for what we call, we hold space for young people. Um, I think that is my contribution to this discussion. And I say thank you, Mike. I think it's definitely something that we need to do more often. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brendan, indeed. There's a lot of interesting material in what you had to say. When you were talking about your role as father to your own two boys, you put in that word accountability. And I think that as a father myself, and maybe many other fathers would echo this, we very seldom, in fact, think of ourselves as being accountable to our children. So thank you for bringing that little aspect out amongst the very many other things which you shared with us. Kevin. you get to be number 3. I'm sure you've still got something fresh to say about this topic. Over to you.
I hope so. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kevin Rutter, and I'm a father.
Morning, Kevin.
Morning, Brendan. Thanks to you and to Jaco for your input. So I'm a father, and I've been a father to 2 beautiful daughters for almost 30 years. So I have some experience. When Taryn, my eldest, was imminent, I started looking into how I could be the most amazing father to this beautiful newborn. And I researched all the info I could find. There was lots of information, but mostly overseas information. So a lot of the stuff I was reading was coming from America and countries like that. And there wasn't too much applying to us locally. Fatherhood in general is a universal thing, so that was fine. But I at that time registered fathers.co.za as a passive resource portal for men to locate details on how to be a good dad. And I also discovered during my research that we had a massive social problem in South Africa, which has been emphasized by both the previous speakers, with more than 60%, closer to 70% of our children growing up without fathers. So the South African media is very aware of this problem. And I would often get calls from radio and television producers to talk about fatherlessness, about the fatherlessness issue in South Africa. So the organization grew as I was provided with that kind of platform to speak into an advocacy platform. And eventually into my full-time work at Fathers in Africa. So that was the evolution of my journey. But as I journeyed further into it, I realized that, in fact, as we were dealing with this problem of fatherlessness, I actually started to, my eyes were opened into the fact that these fathers they were socialized into this situation. And so the impact of how we socialize our boys became very relevant to me. And I have done more work in South Africa around the issue of masculinity and growing boys into decent men, away from this toxic masculinity that we experience. So positive masculinity has been something that I've spent a lot of time nurturing and looking into. So it's grown kind of from fathering into masculinity and mentoring, etc., which is a lot of what Jaco and Brendan do. I deal with a slightly older age group than Jaco does. But the other social issues we experience in South Africa are high rates of gender-based violence, intimate partner violence, violence in general, high rates of teenage pregnancy, and drug and alcohol abuse. All of these issues are the result of a lack of effective fathering and mentorship. We've done something about it. So let me tell you how. First of all, we developed a course called Ubaba Unati. For those of you who don't speak Zulu, Baba is father in Zulu, and Unati means with us. So the program is Daddy with us or Father with us. And this essentially is a program, we've rolled it out to many social workers in South Africa, highlighting the importance of fatherhood to social workers, because like Brendan alluded to, there are a lot of social problems relating to fatherhood. We've had migrant labor, we have issues like nhlawulo, or damages that need to be paid when a young boy gets a girl pregnant. If those damages aren't paid, the child is denied access. We have gatekeeping that happens where mothers close the gate to allowing fathers in. So mothers don't realize the value of fatherhood, and social workers are part of that process. So the Ubaba Unati course, as we rolled it out to social workers in South Africa through the Department of Social Development, emphasizes the importance of fatherhood. And I'll never forget one social worker during one of our sessions saying he was going to go home, because we spend a lot of time talking about fathers not only providing kind of this traditional leadership role in the family, but which I have some problems with, but also the aspect of nurturing. When Laverne Antrobus, who's a British psychologist, did a show on BBC around the biological aspects of fatherhood. And it was very important in her studies. She discovered that when you discover that your partner is pregnant as a man, your testosterone levels drop by 30%. Now, biologically, what does that tell you? That tells you that you'll be becoming more nurturing and more caring. So if we weren't made to nurture our children, you know, what is that about? But back to the story, this social worker decided he was going to go home and spend time that evening bathing his child. Man, he came back the next day to the next session, beaming from ear to ear, and told us what a beautiful experience it was to hold his child close and to bath them. And you know, when you hold your child close as a man, oxytocin is released from you and from your child. And oxytocin is our love hormone. It's that hormone that creates this love feeling between human beings. So that's another biological thing that happens. So it's very relevant for us to realize that fathers are also made to nurture and to care for you know. And at this point, I also want to honor and talk about the role that mothers play in the lives of our children as fathers, you know, providing some sort of positive impact to their children, because children are growing up in these single households. When I work with children at school, I often start off my session by taking a white chart and drawing it in, putting a line down the middle and saying masculine on the left, feminine on the right. And I say to the children, right, what is it to be a man? What is masculine? What is it about? And the first two things that come up almost on every single occasion is protector and provider. Those are traditional masculine roles or fathering roles in a family. And then I stop them immediately and I say, okay, fine. How many of you here are growing up in single homes? And the majority of the class put up their hands. And I said, well, who protects you at home? And they say, well, my mom does. And then I say, and who provides for you? Who puts food on the table? Mom does. So I say to them, can we move provider and protector across to the feminine side as well? And they sit there with big eyes and they say, yeah, of course. I mean, that's what's happening. So we need to, again, and can we take the role of nurturer and carer, which is traditionally feminine, and move it across to the masculine side and say, can dads be nurturing and caring? And the answer, of course, is yes. And we need to be thinking through things like that as well. We also have a course for teenage pregnancies called Rebuilding Dreams. And then the one that I spend a lot of time on, and I've just spent 14 weeks at a school here in the north in Joburg, running a program through life orientation at school called Escaping the Man Box. Escaping the Man Box, it looks at how we socialize our young boys into this kind of traditional masculinity. You've got to be strong, you've got to be fearless, etc., etc. And anything outside of that man box, which is traditionally regarded as feminine, is something that we get ostracized for as young boys. I want to read from a book called Raising Cain, which is reflecting on the emotional life of boys. And I'm really glad that Brendan spent a lot of time talking about this. Boys not only feel the pressure to appear masculine, but they feel that in doing so, they must be clearly not feminine, perhaps even anti-feminine. And so they consciously and deliberately attack in others and in themselves traits that might possibly be defined as feminine. This includes tenderness, empathy, compassion, and any show of emotional vulnerability. Whether these pressures produce a street fighter or not, they impose a standard for masculinity that all boys accept and use to judge themselves. And this is the thing, you know, if we don't conform to this man box, we start wearing masks. I also show as part of the presentation a beautiful movie called The Mask We Live In. And there's a teacher at the school in America that does this exercise with young boys, and he says to them, and he gives them each a mask, and he says, this mask that you wear on a daily basis when you come to school, what is it that you show people? What is it people see? What is on the outside of this mask? And the guys will write on the mask and they say, happiness, you know, I'm singing, I'm friendly, etc. All those things. I'm tough, you know, I'm strong, and so on. And then he says, all right, we're going to mix these masks up. And on the back of the mask, I want you to write out what people don't see. What is it that's behind the mask that you realize yourself, but you don't allow other people to see? And this is where the boys write things like anger and pain and sorrow and things which they don't, as boys, share. They don't share these emotions. And that's what's behind the mask. And so we need to be able to encourage young boys and young men to take these masks off and actually deal with us with that pain that they're experiencing. And the previous speakers have spoken about the fact that men are 4 times more likely to commit suicide than women, because we deal with this mental health issue, and the very thing that drives us to this depression is the very thing that prevents us from getting out of it. We're not meant to show pain. We're not meant to show emotion. We're not meant to show that we hassled about things. We're meant to toughen up. Don't cry. Stop the crying. Be a man. And that's actually not what being a man is about. I once shared a platform with a very well-known speaker. He speaks on the corporate circuit, and I made sure my presentation was on point, and I preceded him, and he's known for his PowerPoint presentations, etc. And this day, I remember he got up and all he did was take the microphone. No PowerPoints, no flashy presentations, and he told a story about his best friends. He was friends. There were 5 of them that were good friends, and they used to watch cricket together, bride together, do all the things that guys do together, but they never used to speak about important issues. And one day, one of his friends came home early from work, went into his bedroom at home. He was married, took a gun out of the drawer and blew his brains out. And my friend said, nobody, not one of us knew what our friend was experiencing. We didn't know the pain that he was going through. And they decided after that they would get together on a regular basis and talk about the important things in life, talk about their emotion, talk about their finances, talk about their love lives, talk about everything that we should be talking about as men together to grow our emotional literacy. We grow up as young boys emotionally illiterate, and they wanted to develop this emotional literacy together as an accountability group. And they took it seriously. I remember him saying he even flew back from an overseas trip once to attend one of these meetings because they were not allowed to not attend. It was something that was in the diary. They were accountable. And he said they had one question that they asked each other after every session. And that question was, have you been 100% honest with us today? Have you been 100% honest? And he said, it took me 1 year to answer yes to that question. 1 year of meeting with his best friends to say, yes, I was 100% honest today. And there's another quote from a beautiful book called Raising a Daughter. Like I said, I have 2 daughters. And Katie, who's 16 years old, wrote this. When I want to tell my boyfriend what I'm angry about, I have to use 10 words or less. If I go on anything longer, he gets so anxious he doesn't hear anything I say. It's different with a girlfriend. If I don't use at least 3 paragraphs, 1 to affirm the friendship, a 2nd to share my feelings, and a 3rd to assure her I want to work this out, she's hurt and insulted and she thinks I don't care. And isn't that the difference? We have run, as Fathers in Africa, an essay contest for children to write about their fathers over many years. And we hear some good stuff and some really bad stuff. One little girl wrote, my father's heartlessness has scratched and left me like a broken record, causing my life to stutter. So Rob Polkowitz wrote in 1984, it's difficult for men to express tender and affectionate feelings towards their babies. And I think, this is when we want to develop emotional literacy in men, this is something that we need to take very seriously. I remember in Escaping the Man Box, having a session with boys, and like Brendan said, it's a place for them to safely share. So it was we create these safe spaces for boys to talk, and we encourage them to talk about emotions and things. One of the things I think in socializing boys, one of the man box things, that the outworking of the man box is the objectification of women and the objectification of young girls. I once went to a water polo tournament at Jeppe boys' school, and I walked in to the pool environment. It was a boys' water polo tournament. I was watching my nephews from Cape Town who both played for Western Province. They were playing water polo at the school, and we walked into this testosterone-filled environment at the pool with, all these boys around us. And I walked in there with my two girls. And one of the fathers on the stand stood up as I walked in with my girls, and he pointed at my girls and he shouted, "Hey boys, look what just walked in." Now, the word "what" in the English language refers to an object. And my girls are not objects. I won't tell you how I handled it, but I did handle it at the time in having a conversation with him. So, those boys who look up to this father were learning this objectification from him. So I remember sitting in this group of boys after one of my sessions with them, and I was asking them to share what they were getting out of the sessions, etc. And I remember the one boy saying, "Sir, what I've learned from these sessions is that girls are much more than boobs and bums." And that was such an important thing for me, because he was already learning that objectification was not cool. So that's it. I'm going to end off just by saying that there was a beautiful study done by Gulf University in Canada in conjunction with FIRA, the Father Involvement Research Alliance. And this is, you can look it up, FIRA or Gulf University, G-U-E-L-P-H, Gulf University. And there's a wonderful paper where they did research on the effects of fatherlessness in children and the effects of being a positive father. And there's a whole host of social findings, girls and boys that are socialized, or girls and boys that have positive fathers, do better at school, they do better socially, they do better academically, etc. And there's some of the negative aspects as well in that study. So I'd like to do that. And then again, if anybody here that's listening wants to be involved in Fathers in Africa, find out more of what we do, you're welcome to just email me at kevin@fathers.co.za or contact me via my website, which is fathers.co.za. So thanks all for your time. I hope it was a positive contribution, and I love sharing with you all.
Thank you very much, Kevin. So a big thanks to all three of you for really, I said I was sure at the beginning that there would be some inspiring content, and indeed there was, and thank you for that. But we still have a huge mountain to climb. I think we're aware of that. We work together and we take it one step at a time. I want to say an equally big thank you to my colleague Lois Law, who runs our project on women, children, and the family. And Lois put this whole thing together. She just asked me to do the talking, but all the work behind this is Lois's. And my other colleague, Sue Doherty, who runs all our events and media side, has also been instrumental in making it happen. In due course, a paper will be published which will summarize some of these issues. Look out for that. It will also be available on the CPLO website. And I'm sure that in due course, because this issue is not going to go away anytime soon, we will encounter each other again one way or the other on another platform one day. And I take great comfort from what Rosroom said. If I understood correctly, Ros has come back after some time away and has detected progress, which is very nice to know. Maybe when we meet again on this, we'll have more progress to report.